Oh, thank you. All right, I'm going to start. Is that okay? You ready? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Senate Transportation Committee. We'd like you to join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would. And Senator Waters, will you do the honors?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will now open the hearing on House Bill 54 FN. There's no sheet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm Representative Mike Moffett of Loudon.
Welcome.
Very excited to be at a Senate committee. Don't get here that often. So this should be a very, very simple, easy measure for you all to consider. We put this in at the request of a neighbor and a constituent. Initially, as it was first introduced, there were two parts to it, one of which had to do with changing the mileage requirements for registration of antique vehicles and also changing the month of the registration. The House Transportation Committee, in its wisdom, did not include or move on the language for the registration mileage. So all you have here is a simple change of a date from March to April for the registration. And the thinking behind that simply has to do with folks with antique cars, especially further north, sometimes in April, such as today. The weather can be bad. There's still salt on the roads, especially up in Senator Gendro's part of the state. Even with climate change, sometimes there's some weather. So April or moving the month forward a month just to have it easier on some of the old cars, and that is about it.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions or comments from the committee?
Question.
Yes.
Thank you for taking the question. I thought an antique car was 25 years. This says 40.
I will have to look at the language of that came forward from the House. There are definitions of what constitutes an antique vehicle, and they vary a little bit from truck to cars, and so I would have to check. We'd have to check on how that might impact this, but the definition of an antique vehicle in terms of years, I'd have to check on that.
I think it's existing statute. I'm okay. Yeah.
All set?
All set.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 54? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 54. So, okay. Yes, I'd like to see how many are in favor of moving into executive session. Aye. Aye. Seeing none are opposed, we will now make the move into executive session.
Everyone, make sure your microphones are on for executive sessions so that it can be picked
I'll
up on
move
the
on
live
to
stream.
pass on House Bill 54.
I'll second it.
And I will comment, Madam Chair, in terms of the question that was raised by Senator Fenton. If you go to the existing statute 266-1-3, that's the language here. It's 40 years, and what this is simply doing is changing April to May. So the existing statute's got your 40. Okay, so I think we're good to go.
Okay.
Motion is still authorized.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There are none opposed. The motion passes
Consent.
5-0.
Consent. Second.
All in favor of consent?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Who would like to take this out?
I'll take it out.
Okay, Senator Gendro will take this out.
I thought it because I was the antique, you'd suggest that I should.
No,
If you're happy,
no.
you're happy to do it.
No, it's just
Okay.
I like antiques.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I do. I do too.
Okay.
Have to wait.
I move out of executive session.
Seconded by,
Second.
all those in favor to come out of executive session?
Aye.
Aye.
We are now in, we have to wait for the next hearing because it doesn't begin till 1:10. One more minute. I know.
And it's the amendment is adding camp directors to the committee.
For the boat registry.
Good afternoon again. It is now 1:10, so we will open the hearing on House Bill 137. The chair would like to welcome and recognize Representative Jim Cretin. Good afternoon, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and we'll get right to it. Bottom line is, the state of New Hampshire is currently out of compliance with federal law. The way that we receive boat registration money and then disperse that money to the DES, Fish and Game, and the Peace Commission is in violation of Coast Guard regulations and federal law. Last year in Resources, Recreation Development, we looked at this bill, HB 641, and it was not capable of bringing us to standard. So we put it into interim study. This bill, HB 137, is a result of the interim study. What this bill does is it gives a committee until November of this year to come up with a plan. And that plan will bring New Hampshire back under federal standards. Simultaneously, we are coordinating with Senator Shaheen's office to change the federal law. There are 7 other states that are in our same predicament. So we're really attacking it from two ends. HB 137 is the internal piece for the state of New Hampshire and what we can do. So I urge you to pass 137 so that we can bring New Hampshire into compliance.
Thank you for your testimony. Do we have questions or comments? Senator Waters?
Yes, just to say, we've looked at the registration issue for a while, and I really appreciate seeing this bill because I think there'll be an opportunity for us really to kind of figure out what we need to do on the fees and move forward on it. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
The chair will now recognize Tim DeLevy. Am I saying that right? Yes. Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee. My name is Tim Dunleavy, and I am the retired captain of the Marine Patrol Unit. I'm here with Lieutenant Wade, who is now the commander of Marine Patrol. But because I've been working this issue since before retirement, I come before you today. House Bill 137 essentially does two things. Both of these things are a result of a review and audit of the Coast Guard of our program as it relates to the receipt of federal boating safety dollars. The first part and the easiest part is related to terms. The boating industry, automobile industry, everything is moving so rapidly. So much of what we need to keep up with federal requirements would require us to come before you with 2 or 3 bills a year. So we've taken a page out of what is very similar to the commercial vehicle section of the motor vehicle law that recognizes federal statutes so that as they change, it gives our commissioner through the administrative rule process the ability to keep up with the changing times. Electric vehicles are an example, and they're coming with boats. So you will see references in handouts that you have before you of CFRs, and I have provided you with copies so that you will see that it's basically related to safety equipment that New Hampshire already has on the books. Just the changes allow us to keep up with the times much quicker and not have to come before you every time there is a change. The second part of this request is what Representative Creighton did a great job of highlighting for you. We collect fees for several agencies when a person registers their boat in this state. It is in violation of federal law for us to collect any fees that are related to milfoil. In the case of Fish and Game, it's public access and search and rescue fund. And in the case of Pease Development Authority, it's a dredging fund for the seacoast. DES is for the lake restoration program, which is primarily dealing with our aquatic invasive species fight. Critical dollars to those agencies, but they are in jeopardy because we are collecting fees at the time of the boat registration. So recognizing that we're in violation, number one, and jeopardizing our own federal grant dollars, we're also in a dilemma as to how to capture those revenues for those agencies that have been receiving them for many, many, many years. And as a result, in order to be able to comply, there's going to have to be another method to capture them, and that's why we're here asking for this study. I'm happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Does the committee have any questions?
Madam Chair.
Senator Ward?
You mentioned administrative rules. I remembered, was it last year that we had that anybody getting a certificate has to take an exam? And that exam was going to be available online. Has that been added to it?
Those rules have been submitted to the department just prior to the holidays. And so I would have to defer you to the Department of Safety legal team who is working on the publication and approval of those rules, but it is in progress.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you all for your time.
The chair will now recognize Andrea Lamoureux.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Andrea Lamoureux, the President and Policy Advocate of New Hampshire Lakes. We're a statewide nonprofit organization with a mission to restore and preserve the health of our lakes. And I'm here today to talk about one aspect of the bill, which the two speakers ahead of me have really already talked about. This jeopardizes, right now, we're in compliance with how we're collecting fees, additional fees. And as Tim mentioned, the Lake Restoration and Prevention Fund largely funds our aquatic invasive species prevention and management programs in New Hampshire. And I just wanted to add that other states have been in this situation, and they have gone ahead and separated out those fees, perhaps without not a lot of thought on how to do that. And those other states have seen substantial crippling reductions in funding. New Hampshire, here in New Hampshire, aquatic invasive species and prevention is already underfunded, and we really can't risk, reducing any additional funding. So by forming this committee, hopefully the committee will be able to figure out a way that we can continue to get all of the fees that are so important. So thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do any of the members of the committee have questions? Nope. Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Chair will now recognize John Wally. Am I saying that right? Good afternoon, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is John Wally. I'm an employee of Silver Sands Marina and the president of the New Hampshire Marine Trades Association. And not to be redundant, but we fully support this bill and want to work with all parties at hand to move forward and pass this bill.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Well, you did such a good job. There's no questions. So thank you for your testimony.
Can I ask Tim to come back up?
Oh, Tim, would you mind coming back, please? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming back up. And I did have a question, in part because you mentioned the transition to electric motors on this, and I was trying to look kind of quickly into 72A and elsewhere, and it seems that, inboard, outboard doesn't make much difference, but they also talk about the horsepower as determined by the shaft. And I'm just wondering, what, potentially how the new kinds of motors might require some kind of changes there. So I just wanted to bring you up in order to say, is this something that this committee probably could look into if it wanted to?
Certainly, we can do that. I am familiar with foot-pounds of thrust.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's the measurement with electric motors.
Right.
There is some of that's lost between the engine and a propeller.
Right.
And so there is a conversion that the Coast Guard uses that does convert it to what they call shaft or propeller horsepower. So, but absolutely, I will take that back to the committee and try to include that in.
Thank you.
It's a good thought.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 137? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 137. Let me see what time it is. A minute, okay. Time for the amendment, yeah.
Good bill.
Oh, yeah. And I don't like last minute, but I was asked just a little while ago for that. It was so simple. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Oh, yeah, I read this. I got this already. Thank you. Running. Okay. We will now open the hearing on House Bill 198 FN. Would Representative Andrew Prout please approach? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am Andrew Prout, representing Hillsborough County District 13, the town of Hudson. This bill will amend RSA 26335, the section that requires new residents to transfer their out-of-state driver's license to an in-state driver's license, to add additional reporting requirements if the person's circumstances change within those 60 days, and direct the Department of Safety to send reminder letters to voters who presented out-of-state driver's license at the polls if they fail to do so. This bill is a follow-up to the letter sent to then Speaker Jasper on September 6, 2017 by the Secretary of State and the Commissioner of Safety. In this letter, a dismal 84.5% unexplained non-compliance rate with the driver's license transfer requirement was reported. I've worked with the Secretary of State, former Assistant Commissioner Bailey, who just left State Service last week, and DMV Director Marcarzo, and together, I believe we've addressed all the implementation concerns with this bill. However, the department did want me to make clear that the notices won't be ready to go to start going out on the effective date of the bill. In fact, they lack the authority to really begin the implementation in earnest until the new data sharing authorization in Section 2 is active law. But they expect everything to be in place before the fall 2024 elections. I've submitted written testimony to the committee that describes the bill in more depth with references to the related documents, so I'll stop here, but I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Any questions? Senator Waters.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't follow this up before the committee hearing, but what are the penalties for failure to comply?
So there is an existing fine on the universal fine schedule for violating Section 35, and I believe it was I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but it was roughly $100, I believe.
May I follow up?
Yes, please.
So if somebody's moved out of state and they haven't complied, and we're gonna fine them, how will that happen?
So that is one issue that is not new with this bill, but is an existing problem also with the existing RSA, the Section 35. There's really no practical way for someone to get fined. So there has a fine on the schedule, but trying to think through how that would ever be issued, couldn't come up with a way it would ever happen in practice. And that really wouldn't change with this new bill. There'd be more data about it, but again, the DMV doesn't have a fine by mail system or anything like that. And this data isn't in the state police database to show up on the screen of a cruiser if they pull someone over. So there's really no practical way for that fine that's on the schedule already to ever be issued in practice, is my understanding.
Thank you. And just one more, if I may. So, I mean, I know this was, basically within a couple of votes in the House, and I just, what about those folks who say that passing a law that we don't think that our state can actually enforce? You have any thoughts about that?
So one of the big new things this will do is they'll send the reminder notices to people who are out of compliance. And so one of the things I'm going to look forward to seeing and fully have warned the DMV to, if this passes, to expect some follow-up in a year or two, is what does the compliance rate look like after reminder notices start? Because right now we're something like 15.5% compliance based on those 2016 numbers. If just with the voluntary compliance rate with a reminder notice shoots up to a much higher number, do we need to do more is the question. But then again, if it stays low, then that'll also be a data point to suggest that maybe we do need to do more. But I really I've really tried not to go overkill with this bill, to really, set up an entire new system or to do fines by mail or anything like that, where we don't have the data to back up that that's required at this time. And also make sure this bill will generate new data so that we can follow up if the data proves out that that's recommended.
I did have one more, if I may.
Of
Or
course.
does somebody else want to? Did you have a question, Ruth? No. Okay. So down towards line 29 onward. So what we're also doing here is saying that information at the Secretary of State on voter records will now be released to the Department of Transportation, or excuse me, Department of Safety.
Yes, so that's, as I mentioned, to be able to generate those reminder notices. So people that use same-day registration and present an out-of-state driver's license, the election officials are already required to record and enter into the statewide database and digitize the information from that out-of-state driver's license. Right now, it just sits in the Secretary of State's office and nothing's done with it. This bill would authorize the Secretary of State to release that information over the Department of Safety and the DMV so that they can send that reminder notice once the 60 days has elapsed and they're out of compliance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of the committee have a question or comment? Nope. All right, seeing none, thank you for your testimony, and the chair will recognize Director Marasco.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you
Nice
so
to
much.
see you.
It's nice to see you. Thank you for having us. Mike Mercier, who is administrator, he oversees driver licensing. We just wanted to offer some informational testimony with regards to how we would actually put this into motion at the DMV if it were passed. So we did have a conference call yesterday with Representative Prout. Supervisor Mercier was on there, as well as Supervisor Jen Bailey, who oversees financial responsibility, DOIT, and our representative from one of our contractors, Tech Mahindra. So we talked about the mechanisms of how to make this happen. So it appears, based on the IT information that we received, that we could do this if the bill were to pass. It would cost $64,000 roughly. It would take approximately 2 months to complete. And one thing that we did talk about was the actual effective date and the fact that we would need some time for testing to make sure that the file that would be coming into the DMV from the Secretary of State's office is something that is, it conforms to the IT infrastructure at the DMV. We also talked about the notices that would go out. So based on the bill, if a New Hampshire license was acquired after the vote, then when that information came in from the Secretary of State's office, our system would deconflict that and recognize the fact that that had been accomplished. For those that have not received the New Hampshire license, then the DMV would be tasked with sending out, as the representative mentioned, a reminder letter. But we confirmed during that phone call that that would end our involvement with the process. So we have no regulatory authority, no enforcement authority, would simply send out the letter, and that would conclude anything the DMV has to do in this process.
Thank you. So we've heard, earlier and from you that there's no enforcement mechanism. And basically you send out the letter, and if anything happens, you'll never know, and who cares, and from your perspective. In your conversation, did you get any indication from the Secretary of State that they wanted to have you have this capacity?
So I haven't had any direct conversations with the Secretary of State's office. Representative Prout, during the conference call yesterday, told me that he had had those conversations. They were supportive of releasing those files for the roughly, back in 2016, 6,500 individuals that would have voted with an out-of-state license but have a domicile in New Hampshire. So I did not follow up with the Secretary of State's office. The purpose of our testimony is just to, obviously it's a decision for the committee on whether or not this is a bill that should move forward. If it were, based on your decision to move forward, we could, on the IT front, make it happen at the DMV. And that's the cost and the amount of time it would take to complete. But that question, Senator, I asked, where does the DMV's involvement with this process stop? And essentially, once you deconflict that somebody got the license within the 60 days, that closes that loop. Once we send the letter out to somebody to say, you have not obtained a New Hampshire license, and actually Representative Prout said that that letter would have something for them to respond to as to why they didn't get the New Hampshire license. Those areas would still have to be worked out. But for our purposes, if the system could generate the letter, we would send out the letter. There would be a cost associated with that, but we would send it out, and that's where our involvement would end. And whether or not the response goes to the Secretary of State's office, or if they do respond, it comes back to the DMV, what we would do with that, I asked that question. Representative Prout said that, several years, maybe 3 years down the road, he would come back and ask for the data to see if it's still at 85% of those that didn't get the New Hampshire license. So I don't think there's anything regulatory here. It's more for data.
I just may ask one more on that point. So the bill doesn't even say if they respond, who gets the response, right?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I don't either. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I have one. So I'm just trying to be clear. If you send this out, you're saying that it's fine and it costs $64,000, you can do the workload. but that's it. There's no follow-up.
That's correct.
I'm
That's-
trying to understand the purpose if there's no follow-up. That's where I'm confused.
I asked the same question, Senator, and my understanding is there's no enforcement to this, at least anything to do with the DMV. So Representative Proud explained that it was more for data and having those numbers. So if they're queried, we can show. And the only nexus to the DMV in this whole thing is the license part. So because we do hold that information and the bill is something that's being heard, we just wanted to let you know if you passed it, these are the things that we could do. But yes, at that point, I guess we would just hold on to the data until somebody asks for it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? All right, thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 198? Seeing none, we're going to close the hearing on House Bill 198. And just in time for opening the hearing, let me just get the sheet first. Thank you, Peter. Okay. We will now open the hearing on House Bill 268 FN. And the chair will recognize Representative Trotter. No? Is there someone here to introduce the bill?
I'll be glad to, Madam Chair. Do you want to?
Okay. Thank you, Senator Fenton.
Madam Chair and ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I am Senator Donovan Fenton, District 10. I'm here to introduce House Bill 268 FN relative to the furnishing of special number plates to the Liquor Commission, Division of Enforcement and Licensing, and official cover plates to the House Clerk. Thank you.
We won't ask you anything. Okay, the chair will recognize Jeff Ober. Am I saying it right? Thank you. Oh, you don't want to, oh, actually, there's no one who wants to speak.
Silence is golden, huh?
Would you like to come forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good afternoon, Senators. I come today representing the Executive Council and would ask this committee for an amendment to this bill since we're on the subject matter of cover plates. Yeah, Executive Councilor Dave Wheeler, District 5. When we got our cover plates this year, we found out that the statute has always said that our cover plates would alternate red and green and red like yours do. And but that's not what we've been doing for the last 30 years. So we got a green plate this year, and too late to have a bill introduced, and I don't think we would want to spend the money for this simple of an issue anyway. So we're asking for a committee amendment today. I brought my plate from 21 to 22. They've been blue as long as I know, and we just like to keep that tradition to keep the council plates blue and update the statute to reflect that. I don't know how we went 30 years against the statute, but we've had blue and white for, in my memory, at least 30 years, and would respectfully ask that you allow us to keep up with that tradition.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. Has anyone asked, as far as the production of the plates gone directly to, I mean, I'm not familiar with who produces the plates, but has there been a direct question as to why it went from blue to green?
Well, this is just a guess, and you can ask him because he's right here. But I think the director, when he took over, decided he would follow the law, rightfully so. And that's why they were green, and we're just asking a little housekeeping measure, if we could just keep them blue, correct the law.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for members of the committee?
No.
Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Are there any members of the public or Director Marasco or anyone who'd like to speak to House Bill 268? Hi, please come forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Hello again.
Twice in one day, yes.
And honorable committee members, for the record, my name's Mark Armaganian. I'm the Chief of Enforcement and Licensing for the Liquor Commission. Along with the housekeeping theme that was this morning, and I am actually on point with the counselor on license plates for us. I don't have, where I had this morning, a lot of historical value. I don't have any on this. I believe that to give you some of my personal experience, 28 years with the state police prior to coming over to the Liquor Commission. I was, my final command was Investigative Services Bureau, where I had all the detectives. With that, detectives run a high-profile plate and an undescript plate that is registered with DMV for the purposes of those activities that are high profile. When I came over to the Liquor Commission, there was no such entity. And again, in the interest of housekeeping with everything else we are doing to fix the division, we thought that we should have a high profile plate for those high profile events such as Motorcycle Week, working down at the beach, doing our enforcement activities that sometimes people didn't know who we were, which not only is bad business, but it's unsafe. So this is, again, one of those things that I came up with a rendition, spoke to not only Director Marasco, but Assistant Commissioner Bailey at the time and Commissioner Quinn. Everybody actually, the question was, why now? Why hasn't this happened prior? I don't have the answer to that. I wasn't around then. So knowing that, I would ask for the committee support in moving forward with this plate. The rendition is very similar to the other state law enforcement plates. It's something similar than when I did the rebrand of Marine Patrol when I had that command. Very similar to that, extremely similar, where it has something that's very near and dear to our hearts and statutorily bound, to live free or die. It has very clearly who we are and that we work for the Liquor Commission. And it would be the blue and white. If you want to see it closer.
This is fine.
Okay. And that's all I have open for questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Director Marasco, would you like to come forward? Of course.
Madam Chair, member of the committee, so I'll be brief. I did have the opportunity to work with Director Armaganian. He had asked about the plate. It makes perfect sense for those operations. It's something that we can do through the prison, and we're happy to do that. And it is a housekeeping item and a great addition to their fleet. Sir.
Senator Waters.
Yeah. So, could you get us a little language that will do for the executive council and for this, for us, how to amend this?
Sure. We have it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll exec next, we're not gonna exec this one today.
No.
We'll get if we can get the language.
Yes, sir. We'll definitely,
good.
we'll get that.
Put it all together.
On that change too, as the councilor said, I did speak with Councilor Wheeler about this. We
Good.
fully support it, and he's right. The way that the law is written is every 2 years, the plate should change from green to red, and it should go in that order. They haven't done that in the past, so we fully support the change for the executive council plates.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your testimony.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak from the public on 268? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 268. We can start the next one. Okay. We will now open the hearing on House Bill 412, and the chair will recognize Representative Mark. Thank you.
For the record, my name is Mark McConkey. I represent the good people of Carroll County District 8 and presently serve as Chairman of Public Works and Highways. We brought this bill to you, House Bill 412, establishing a commission to study revenue alternatives to the road toll for funding improvements to the state highway and bridges and their resulting improvements to the environment. We are faced with ever dwindling road toll fees that we receive at the gas pumps because of the much higher efficiency of our cars and trucks and the introduction of electric vehicles going forward. There's no mechanism to capture that loss of revenue. A commission had come out of last year's legislation, a House bill, but it unfortunately, House bill, I think it was 1040, but by the time we got organized in commissions, appointing people to commissions, we only had time, I believe, for 2 meetings and a final report. We have in place 8 of the 9 people that were appointed to the commission. We unfortunately didn't have a member from the Senate, which we would hope we would get participation this time for. It's needed. We need to come up with that new model, and without it, it makes funding of highways, as you folks, bridge repairs and so forth, very difficult going forward. Happy to take any questions.
Senator Waters.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Representative. I'm glad to see this bill. I just had a couple questions. You know, when we had the Commission on EV Infrastructure a number of years ago, and I worked with Representative Smith at that point to set up the Transportation Council. And, you know, part of what we were doing there and its duties was it would be the handoff from that commission to keep looking at the EV infrastructure issues. And so I guess I kind of a couple questions really. I mean, would there, the logic of saying, well, that we should do it instead of them, and then that aside, in a way, you'd consult with them?
I missed a little part of that, and it seems to be the biggest nugget of that. Were you speaking federal?
No, we established the, you know, the Transportation Council.
Oh, I apologize. Okay. Yes.
And part of the duties that Representative Smith and I put in there was to have the handoff of working on electric vehicle infrastructure and other issues related to them. So I don't know. I mean, I'm all for this too, but I just wondered about any conversations about whether actually they could do it.
I don't have the answer to that, but I'll certainly find out that.
Yeah,
I think it's a
I've
valid
talked to
point.
Jim Jalbert on occasion about it. But I guess maybe it's to say then if it's, you know, if you talked with Jim Jalbert and it seemed that it might make sense for a member of that Transportation Council, such as the chair or his designee, to be on this, maybe that would be a way to coordinate.
I think that's a great suggestion.
If I may have asked one more, Madam Chair?
Of course.
I mean, obviously, this is an important issue. I mean, I go back, you know, at least almost 10 years now, work with Norm Major on what we're going to do. And we've thrown everything at the wall, right?
Yes.
Now, speaking of throwing things at the wall, you're going to get a bill from us that has the $100 surcharge.
Yes.
Now, there's nothing, there's no real conflict that this could pass and that could pass, right?
Correct.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Any other members of the committee have a question or comment? Seeing none, Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The chair will now recognize Sam Evans Brown. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Sam Evans Brown, the Executive Director of Clean Energy New Hampshire. We support this bill, and generally speaking, are just coming forth to pull forward a couple salient facts to the committee that I think will be really important to ensuring that this commission takes into account. ISO New England is the independent system operator of New England. They're the entity that ensures that the lights turn on in this room when we hit the switch. And one of the aspects of that job is forecasting electric load out into the future. They are forecasting a 50-fold increase in electric vehicle usage in the states around New Hampshire, a 10-fold increase in New Hampshire, 50-fold in the states all around us over the course of the next decade. And just not to put too fine a point on it, when your roads and bridges are funded through a gas tax, and there are a lot of out-of-state visitors who are coming in and paying that gas tax, that's going to be a really important number to keep in all of our minds. So very glad to see that this commission is going to come back together, and we will be, as Clean Energy New Hampshire, will be trying to participate actively in helping that commission come to a wise suggestion to the legislature. And more to the point, the last thing I wanted to tease out is that I do think that Senate Bill 191, which has already been mentioned here, is a good first step towards making sure that that as a transition to electric vehicles starts to get underway, that we're not shortchanging our institutions in the interim while we figure out how to fill the gap going forward. So happy to take any questions, but mostly just wanted to say right on.
Any questions from the committee? Well, seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Okay, are there any other members of the committee that would, or from the public that would like to speak to House Bill 412? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 412. Let me see what time it is.
Oh, let's wait till after the next one.
1:30. Oh, yeah, might well.
Then we can.
Okay. We will now open the hearing on House Bill 189. And I am looking for Kevin Grady to come forward. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. For the record, my name is Kevin Grady. I'm not introducing the bill, but I'm just going to tell you what I think of the bill as a, go ahead.
We have to,
Yeah, I would think,
I'd like to introduce House Bill 189. Thank you.
you can do it from here.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
did. I just
Oh. Okay.
Thank you, Senator. For the record, my name is Kevin Grady. I'm a 25-year Air Force veteran, and I'm a 23-and-a-half-year resident of the town of Hooksett in New Hampshire. And today I'm here representing the State Veterans Advisory Committee. For those of you unfamiliar with what we do, we have 20 members or organizations. For members that would be familiar to you, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, folks like that. I personally represent the Air and Space Force Association. We've recently changed our name to include the Space Force, since they're under the Air Force now. And I'm the legislative chair for those folks. And what we do is we go through all of the bills that are going to come before you folks We figure out which ones have better impact, and then we take a position on those, and I come and tell you what we think of that. And one of the reasons I tell you that is if your plan is to introduce a bill that you think has better impact, we are more than happy to work with you to make sure that the language is exactly the way you want it to be and it accomplishes what you want it to accomplish. We unanimously do support this bill. Our policy is if there's a stretch of roadway that we want to name after one of our fallen heroes, we are happy to do that as a recognition for what we all believe, which is when one of us serves all of us, the whole family serves. And this really does call attention to all of that. What we're hoping with the passage of this bill is that as people drive by this sign, they'll do what I did before I came to see you today, which is Google search this young man's name and see if you can learn a little something about him. And I'd just like to take a 30 seconds to tell you a little something about Nicholas Cornoyer's life. He was born in Concord, and he was raised in the town of Gilmanton and graduated from Gilmanton High School in 2000. He worked as a mason's assistant in Laconia for the next 5 years and really had wanted to join. In fact, it's in his yearbook in high school that he'd always wanted to join the Army. And he eventually did join the Army in January of 2005 and was stationed at Fort Drum, New York. His unit subsequently deployed to Iraq, where tragically on the 18th of May of 2006, at the age of 25, he was killed by a roadside improvised explosive device. He was described as a huge Patriots and Red Sox fan, so I'm certain I would have gotten along with him famously. Other than that, I just wanted to let you know we do fully support this bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about us or the State Veterans Advisory Committee.
Well, thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee?
Just a comment. Thank you very much for serving.
Thank you. It was my honor to serve, Senator.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you for your
Thank you, Senator.
testimony. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 189? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 189.
I'll move executive session.
Senator Waters moves executive session. Senator Ward seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
The committee is now in executive session. I would like to bring a bill up for discussion. How about House Bill 137? May I have a motion?
Move on to pass.
I'll second.
Second.
And
We have an amendment we have to discuss.
I'll move on to pass on Amendment 1315S, which adds, if I may, Madam Chair,
Please.
representative from the New Hampshire Camp Directors Association, who expressed the desire to be here on this group. Makes a lot of sense. So that's what the amendment does.
Now, what's the number with 1315S?
Yeah, it's this one. You got it.
Richard,
You got it.
okay.
Yep.
Senator Waters, thank you for discussing that. So we'll call a vote on the amendment. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? Vote is 5-0.
I apologize.
Now we
Who-
need ought to pass with amendment.
I'm sorry, who made that motion and who seconded it? Senator Waters, who seconded the motion? Senator Ward, okay, thank you.
And I'll move on to pass as amended.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? Again, 5-0.
I'll move consent.
So moved.
Second?
We have to vote for consent.
Yeah, all in favor of consent?
Aye.
Aye. Who would like to take this out?
Why don't you?
Okay.
Your amendment.
I'll take it out.
You're the boss.
Okay. We're the boss. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there another bill that someone would like to either bring up to vote on or to discuss while we're
Well, how about
in
the
executive
last-
session?
The last one that we just did.
Yeah.
I'll second.
House Bill
If that's the
188.
motion, Senator Ward, I'll second.
Okay.
189?
Yeah.
I'll second.
Was that a not to pass motion?
I'll move ought to pass 189.
And Senator Waters seconded it. All in favor of ought to pass on 189?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? Okay.
Is there any thought that any members of the family or anybody would like to be there? So why don't we not put it on consent?
Okay,
All right.
That's a good idea.
And if they're there, we can special order it, so, yeah.
If they're there, we can special order beginning the calendar.
Yeah, nice.
so they can be in the gala.
Because it'll be next, a week from,
Otherwise, it would be very, at the
Yeah.
end of the relative.
be a week from tomorrow probably, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so,
Did we establish who
doing
was
with
taking this
268?
bill out?
You haven't got that far yet.
We need a amendment language for 268.
I have an amendment to 268. for Senator
Well,
Brown.
but who
wait,
wants-
who's going to take out this?
Do you want to take out 189, Ruth? You made that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
all right, Senator Ward will take out 189, and then, Senator Ward, you have an amendment for
No, for 268.
268.
I'm gonna take that out.
Well, let's, I think we were gonna get some language from the director on how to do what needs to be done for the color
Right.
and the other thing, so why don't we
Wanna wait?
get that next week?
Okay, I think we should wait on 198 and on
fine.
268, and I think we'll hold off on 412 for
Okay,
now.
all right.
Everybody agree?
I do.
Right. So that being said, I'd like a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Okay, seconded by,
Second.
okay, all in favor of coming out of executive session?
Aye.
None opposed? Now I need a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
So moved.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None.
Hooray! Hooray! We got our bills done the last couple of weeks, huh? It's good,
We're speeding.
good.
Just to note, the committee, any bills next week